All right, welcome everybody. You're in the right place if you're here for one of the first public conversations amongst candidates in Council District 4 for the 2024 election. We are live here at LA Forward Institute with two of our candidates. We're going to jump in a moment, but I want to make sure to pass things off to our Executive Director, David Levitas, to get us started.
Great.
David.
Thank you so much, Godfrey. Thanks to the candidates for being here, and thanks to all of you for being here as well. My name is David Levitas. As Godfrey mentioned, I'm the founder and executive director of LA Forward Institute. And LA Forward Institute, legal disclaimer, we're a 501c3 organization. We don't support or oppose or endorse candidates. You may have heard of another organization with a similar name that does stuff like that, LA Forward. That's a 501c4. But this forum is sponsored by LA Forward Institute and is not associated with any endorsement process or endorsements that LA Forward 501c4 may make. Our mission at LA Forward Institute is simple in the sense of, we're fighting for a Los Angeles County that's a fair and flourishing place for everybody, and from housing to mobility to climate to transportation justice to so many more things, democracy reform. Fighting not just for policies, but trying to educate the electorate to do community organizing, civic education. And so there's a broad range of things that we do, trying to really make democracy real, to unlock democracy. And this forum that we're hosting and so many others is part of that. So that's all I have to say. And I'll pass it back over to Godfrey to talk a little bit more about the upcoming timeline.
Absolutely. And one of the reasons why we are doing this right now, for the sake of education, making sure everyone is on the same page, is in 2024, on the primary ballot, there will be elections for city council seats in our even number council districts here in Los Angeles City. And so today you are here for a conversation about Council District 4. Later on, we're going to show you a map of where Council District 4 is to make sure we're grounded in that. But just to be clear, but what even a primary refers to, typically we refer to one election day, and that primary day historically has been one day. We know, though, in California, we actually all do get mail-in ballots a month before that election day. So really, we're talking about an election month between February 5th and March 5th. In order to get on that particular ballot, candidates must, in addition to many other things, must collect a specific number of signatures to be nominated and put on the ballot. That will happen in November. And so we're having this series of conversations, not just for CD4, but for other council districts. If you've joined us before for other council district forums, or are joining us tomorrow for Council District 14, then it is really important for us to just make sure that folks get behind particular candidates that align with their values now, because they might not be on the ballot if you don't start to get behind them now. And so that's where we're going with this in terms of timeline. Right now, I do want to acknowledge there are 3 candidates in the race. A third candidate filed last week, reached out to us early this week, which was not enough time for us to be able to regenerate this program, revision this program, et cetera. So we are having this conversation with 2 of the 3 candidates. Should no candidate get beyond 50% in this February-March ballot, there will be a runoff in November. So that's what we're looking at in terms of timeline. I do want to ground us in CD4, though, and to pass off that particular conversation. I'm going to pass things to Erica Liepman. Erica?
Hi, Godfrey. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. So my name's Erica Liepman. My pronouns are she, her. I am a CD4 resident. I live in Los Feliz with my girlfriend and our 2 cats. And if you're lucky, they might make a cameo on this particular Zoom. I'm a nonprofit founder and a nonprofit consultant. I'm a longtime LA Forward volunteer and supporter, and now work part-time with the organization. And I'm so passionate about the conversation that we're going to have tonight. I previously worked for the city of LA. I've seen, firsthand what it really looks like for our government teams and how much it matters to have effective leaders in office that can effectively respond to the many challenges our city faces. That can include emergencies like fires, earthquakes, even global pandemics. The city is also the custodian of our public spaces. That includes our parks, our libraries, our streets, and our sidewalks. And the city's on the front lines with some of the greatest challenges we face, like the homelessness crisis and figuring out where affordable and supportive housing should get built in our city. Like every district, Council District 4 is huge. It's diverse. It includes communities that you see on this map. So stretching from Los Feliz, the Hollywood Hills, Encino, Sherman Oaks. It's got parts of Silver Lake, Studio City, Reseda and Van Nuys, and more. So it's a big district and a lot of communities represented. We're really excited to have the candidates with us tonight, and I'd like to, shout them out as Godfrey mentioned. And so thank you very much to Councilmember Nithya Raman and Ethan Weaver for joining us tonight. And I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Erica. Now, to make sure that we are being fair to both participants, we do want to just set the ground rules for what this space will look like. This is great for the audience as well, to just make sure that we know what to expect. So a couple of things. Here's what each candidate will get to engage with. They will have about 3 minutes for an opening statement. You even see the timer in the top corner of your screen, so everybody will be clear on how much time is left. We've instructed folks who are helping to MC across the way, who are all residents in Council District 4, to feel free to interrupt if you see the time coming down to 0. The candidates will also get 3 minutes at the very end as well to wrap up with any closing statements. They can use that time for whatever they want. In between, we've prepared 5 issue-specific questions that will each be presented by a CD4 resident who will share something about themselves, a story, or something like that to set up the question, and then the question itself. Each of the questions has been shared in advance with each of the candidates, so they've had equal amount of time to spend time with those questions. They will each have 2 minutes to respond to each of those issue questions. There is a chat box, of course, for all the participants. We do ask that you reserve the chat box for educational reasons and resources. Sometimes we like to comment extraneously, and we ask that you do the commenting on Twitter if you would like. This chat box is for education and resources. A couple of other things. We want to make sure that there's fairness in who gets to go first. So we're going to start with alphabetical order by last name. And so you see that particular order on your screen, and then we're just going to continue switching places. So the next question will switch, the next question will switch. And so different folks will have an opportunity to be first or to be second in terms of answering questions. Here are the particular issue topics that we've prepared questions for. These are issue topics that have come up in the course of LA Forward Institute's organizing across the last year or so. And again, these questions were shared in advance. With that, we are going to move on to opening statements, which again, each candidate has 3 minutes to be able to share some introductory remarks. And so I'd like to pass things off to Councilmember Nithya Raman first.
Well, thank you so much, Godfrey, and everybody at LA Forward for helping to organize this forum. It's really a pleasure to be here and talk to all of you. I wanted to use this space to tell you a little bit about myself and what I've been doing in office during my time here. I'm an immigrant to America. My family and I moved here when I was 6 years old from India. I'm the mother of twins who attend 2nd grade at the LAUSD school down the street. And I'm an urban planner by training. And I didn't always plan to be in politics. This was not something that I felt was in the cards, but I was a volunteer in my neighborhood. I worked on homelessness because I saw more tents popping up in my neighborhood than I had ever seen before. And I joined my neighborhood council's homelessness committee, and I started a volunteer group, which very quickly grew to be one of the most active volunteer groups in the entire city. And I decided to run for office because I'm a student of cities, and I knew that the city could be doing more to address not just the homelessness crisis, but so many of the crises that face us right now. I knew as an urban planner that the city had tools to be much more active, and I didn't see it using those tools. And as a volunteer and looking around at my fellow volunteers, I didn't feel like the city reflected my urgency for change. And I wanted that. And that message really resonated with people. I won, defeating an incumbent for the first time in 20 years. And in the little over 2.5 years that I've been in this whole role, my hope is that I've really delivered on that promise of using government to push for change. Earlier this year, we passed the largest expansion of tenant protections in nearly 40 years, making just cause eviction protections universal, covering 400,000 new households. We've made it faster, easier, and cheaper to build affordable housing in this city. We took a decisive step away from our reliance on fossil fuels in this city by mandating that all new construction, commercial and residential, is carbon-free. It's all electric. And the thing that I'm the most proud of is in our response to homelessness in our district. We've housed hundreds of people at encampments that were on our district streets when I got elected by aggressively scaling up our outreach and the number of beds and housing that we had available. It led to the first reduction of street homelessness in 6 years in my districts, and entire encampments were gone, not because we pushed people to another sidewalk or pushed them to another district, but because we brought them indoors. I want to run for office again. I want to run for this seat again because I want to do more. I was recently elevated to the chair of the Housing and Homelessness Committee. I have real leadership responsibilities within the city and a strong relationship with the mayor. And I want to make sure that I really build on the successes that I've had and bring it to scale across the entire city. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Perfect timing. I'm going to pass things next to Ethan Weaver. Ethan?
Great. Well, thank you all so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to come speak with you all. I also never thought running for office was going to be in my cards. I went to law school with one dream, and it was to be a prosecutor. And I went to UCLA, and I became a city attorney right after school. And then 5 years ago, I became the neighborhood prosecutor in Hollywood. And what that is, it's a prosecutor that works in the community alongside neighbors, small businesses, and with every city agency trying to solve problems on the ground. And it was one of the best jobs I've ever had. And it gave me a front row seat to the problems facing our city. And the thing that made me start to shift my career path was I saw the structural problems in our city having a real world impact on our community on the ground. And a lot of the problems that I saw affecting neighborhoods every single day just were not being addressed. And I realized that my experience working with the community gave me the perfect experience, and working with city agencies gave me the perfect experience to try to bring change in the ways I think our city really needs. I see three main priorities for me from my experience. The first one is obviously around homelessness. This is an area we all see every day. Our city is spending $1.3 billion a year on homelessness, and I've seen up close that money is not being used well. It is going into contracts that prioritize spending money instead of the outcomes achieved. And we're involved, and LAHSA itself, the Los Angeles Homeless Authority, is an organization that's designed to fail. It has no clear lines of leadership and lacks substantial accountability. So that's an issue that is close to home for me. Another big issue for me is policing. I've worked in a police station for years. I've seen policing up close. I've seen where it's failing, and I've seen where it's broken down the trust in the community. It's not a matter of, do we give police more money or less money? Do we fund or defund? It's a matter of, how do we build a police force that actually has the trust of the community? And that is something I'm deeply passionate about and is a top priority. And the last thing that matters tremendously is affordable housing. I'm a renter. I live in a studio apartment with my partner, Michael. And our generation, the millennial generation, is priced out of this housing market, both as renters and as future home buyers. And building more affordable housing, we'll talk about a little bit more later, is one of the great challenges for our generation, both for us who are housed and to keep people from being unhoused. So those are the priorities that I'm bringing to the table, and I'm excited to talk more with you over the next hour.
Thank you so much for those introductions. Now we're going to head into our issue-specific questions. Again, for this round of 5 questions, each candidate will have 2 minutes each, and we're going to flip who goes first each time. So I'm going to pass things off to a resident in CD4, Emily Cook, to start us off with the first question.
Good evening. As Godfrey introduced me, my name is Emily Cook, and I'm a native Angelino living in Los Feliz. Several months ago, I came across an unhoused person at the intersection of Finley and Hillhurst who was setting fire to some trash on the corner. I was pretty scared. I tried interacting with him to de-escalate the situation, but I walked away from it not knowing what to do and what I could do to help him instead of harm him. I'll be asking a question about unarmed crisis response. In your vision for Los Angeles, what type of incidents do you think are appropriate for police to respond to, if any? And what do you believe should be attended to outside of the police, if any? What models of unarmed crisis response are you interested in? And how would you fund this and make it a reality? I believe Councilmember Raman is up.
You want me to go for this first?
Oh,
Yes,
I think
please.
it's Ethan first. Sorry.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That's
You're
on
fine.
me.
That's okay. That's all
You're
right. I thought we were switching off, so that's why I was, but please, happy to do whatever you want.
Let's hear from Ethan first if he's available.
Okay, great. So I like the idea of unarmed responders. I think it's important that we focus LAPD on crimes and not these kinds of incidents of mental illness. These are not problems they want to deal with, and they're not problems they're equipped to solve. Here's my concern about unarmed responders. I have worked with the Circle team in Hollywood. It was one of the first unarmed response teams, mental health teams that have come out. And a persistent problem is there will be a person experiencing a mental health crisis, and the mental health responders in the Circle team don't want to approach the person because they do not know if that person is armed. And the reality is a huge portion of our unhoused community is armed at any moment. And I'm not talking about guns, I'm talking about knives or just things that could inflict harm. And it's not a criticism. If I was living on the streets too, I would want something to protect myself. But when you're now dealing with a mental illness, a lot of these unarmed responders in a lot of the situations still call the police to intervene. So I think we need to be very realistic about the limitations. I think it's something we should work towards. But what I think would be a great model is bringing mental health responders into the police station and assigning them to work alongside the police. Not only will this allow these kinds of de-escalation situations to go more smoothly and less violently, but also I think when we think about how do we change LAPD culture, how do we make policing better, the best way is through exposure. And I'm going to tell you from working with the police, if you put a mental health worker and a police officer in a patrol car for 10 hours a day and make them partners, not only will the mental health worker feel comfortable in lots of situations where they don't, but that officer is going to start developing a tool set he or she could never develop otherwise, and a new way of thinking. And we start rotating the officers through that system. I think that's a great way to start changing LAPD culture.
Thank you.
Great. Well, I really do. I think that we need law enforcement as a response to violent crime. I really believe in also building up our investigative resources. I think that's how we bring down crime rings, which are driving a rise in home robberies across the city. But a lot of the calls that are coming into our system now, to which police are currently responding to, are non-violent calls about homelessness, like someone sleeping in a doorway or someone making a lot of noise on a street. And when these calls are coming in, sometimes no one shows up, and sometimes the police show up and say that they can't do anything. And I think that's a real concern for me. I think we need to be a city where somebody really shows up and helps you when you call for help. And so I want to talk about what has been successful in my district. We've pushed to expand Circle to our Basin neighborhoods as of last year, and now it's also coming to our Valley neighborhoods. Circle teams are specifically trained to respond to calls about homelessness, and they do both proactive outreach and response to emergency calls. And so when they do get that call, individuals on the other side of that call get connected to services. We've actually seen it happen. We've seen Circle teams not just resolve an incident, but actually bring someone to a hospital or bring someone to an emergency shelter or to a higher level of care. But you also get the person who made the call feel a little more confident in their city services, someone who feels safer. And you can feel that lack of confidence all over the city. And I think for me, as someone who's been in this role, it's devastating to our civic health. I've also heard from LAPD over and over again that Circle has allowed them to focus on serious crime. So you're getting results for constituents on 2 different levels when you invest in unarmed response. So I really believe in it. And I think having a citywide Circle program, as well as a mental health crisis response program, like the psychiatric mobile response teams, are 2 essential pieces of this citywide response. And you get funding for it by fighting for funding in the budget process, exactly as I've done.
Thank you both for your responses this evening, and I'm going to pass things off to Valerie.
Hello, thank you. My name is Valerie, she, her, and I'm a constituent of CD4 in Hollywood. And I think housing is top of mind for many people tonight. So my question will be about social housing. So in 2022, voters said yes to Measure ULA, which created a transfer tax to fund affordable housing and homelessness prevention in Los Angeles. Its funding creates a pot of money for many types of affordable housing, including alternatives like social housing. The ACT LA Coalition, of which LA Forward Institute is a member, has been inspired by housing options in cities like Vienna and New York City, and is working with council members now to approve social housing that is designed to be permanently affordable, built on public lands, and ultimately managed by its tenants. ACT LA's social housing platform envisions 8,000 social housing units in the next 10 years. Do you support social housing in Los Angeles? And what would you do, or for Councilmember Raman, what are you doing to make this a reality? Do you support other paths to decommodify housing? And if so, what? And we'll start off with the council member.
Great. Thank you so much for this question. I definitely support social housing. And social housing is distinct from public housing or publicly owned housing, in that social housing is mixed income, but it's also, it publicly owned and managed or publicly financed. In the near term in Los Angeles, I want to be real that a lot of our housing investments are really housing that looks more like traditional public housing, mostly because we have such a desperate need for low income and supportive housing units. So this means investing in building permanent supportive housing units, using project-based vouchers. We're also doing a lot of purchasing of permanent supportive housing units. We're buying already built apartment buildings and hotels and motels and doing conversions to make them into permanent supportive housing through HomeKey. And we've bought thousands of new units. This is decommodified housing, and we're doing much more of it than we have in recent years in Los Angeles, and it's incredibly exciting. Now we have a resource that we haven't had before, which is ULA dollars. I endorsed the measure. I phone banked for it. I was so excited about it. And the initial tranche of ULA funding that's gone out has focused on emergency rental assistance, but our next tranche is focusing on building things, on construction. Labor supported this initiative, and we want to make sure that we're building as much as possible through it. ULA has a set aside 22% of dollars that can be used for construction, and some of that can be used for really trying new financing concepts that would be new to Los Angeles. I think we have to learn how to finance housing the way that they've done it in Vienna, the way that they've done it in other places, but it is something I know we can learn. We've learned a lot of new things in the affordable housing space recently, and this too is something that I'm inspired by, and I think ULA dollars give us the pathway to really being able to make those investments.
Thank you. Ethan, if you'd like to share your comments now.
Absolutely. So yes, I absolutely support decommodifying housing. I support any pathway we have to build more housing is so critical. We need to build. This is one of the reasons our housing prices are where they are, and people are getting priced out into homelessness. Something I think a lot about when we're talking about housing is, where are the barriers? Where are the biggest barriers to building more housing, especially permanent supportive housing and low-income housing and affordable housing? I've talked to a lot of people who develop, especially nonprofits who use this kind of public funding to develop, to build housing. And they all say the exact same thing. the biggest obstacle to building is the city of Los Angeles. There are rules and restrictions and costs in the city of Los Angeles that Glendale doesn't have, that all of our surrounding neighbors don't have. And a lot of the money and investment in low-income housing is fleeing Los Angeles. And just to put it in perspective, permanent supportive housing, kind of the gold standard of homeless housing, those costs are rising to $700,000, $800,000 a unit. And in some projects the city's looking at right now, it's as much as $1 million a unit. This does not scale. There is no way the math is going to work out for us to ever house the amount of people we need to house at our current cost trajectory. So we need to focus on bringing down the cost, and the biggest barriers are the city. It's the slowness of the permitting process. It's layers of bureaucracy that other jurisdictions don't have, specialized consultants that as a result of lawsuits that other jurisdictions don't have to employ. And if we don't change the trajectory, the costs are going to keep rising with every new unit built, and we're never going to get out of this crisis.
Thank you. Now I'm going to pass the mic to Matt.
All right. Hello, my name is Matt Trujillo. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm a resident of the Los Feliz neighborhood. So I was late to this meeting because I picked the bus to and from work, and the bus was delayed by 15 minutes. Not that long, but a bit of an inconvenience. I also would like to say that I'm an avid bike rider, but frankly, after a couple months of trying to ride my bike in this neighborhood, given the lack of infrastructure, I just frankly felt unsafe doing so. So as much as I would love to be a bike rider, I'm not. And so my question is about mobility in our district. The city of LA made a commitment to its residents with the Mobility Plan 2035, focusing on improving safety, access, infrastructure, decision-making for everyone who walks, rides, rolls, drives in the city. But unfortunately, since passing of the Mobility Plan, less than 10% of that plan has been implemented. And so what aspects of the Mobility Plan are your biggest priority for our district? And what steps would you take to ensure full implementation of those parts of the plan? I believe, Mr. Weaver, you're up first this round.
Great question. So the top of mind thing when we're talking about the mobility plan is what's called the high injury network. This is a series of locations within the city that the vast majority of our traffic injuries and fatalities all happen at. This has to be the priority, making environmental changes at these locations so they are not the most dangerous locations in our city. But something, Matt, that you said that really struck with me about mass transit and biking. So for 4 years, from about 2016 to 2020, I didn't own a car. I took the red line to work every single day, and it was great. I would have loved to bike, but just like you, I was a little afraid to bike. But I love taking mass transit until the pandemic came, and I saw a massive deterioration of safety on our mass transit system. I saw the amount of violence, drug use, and crime that I'd never seen before. And I'm a 6'1" guy. I'm pretty big, and I didn't feel safe on the trains. And it's not just, and I had the privilege, I finally had to break down and buy a car. I had the privilege of being able to buy a car. Most people on the train are there for, don't have that privilege. And it's not just the riders that are in trouble. On average, every other day, a Metro employee is attacked on the job. The violence on our mass transit system is terrible, and it affects the poorest among us the worst. And so we have to prioritize making transit not only safe and not only reliable, but safe for the people that ride on it. I want to go back to a world in which we can all ride mass transit and feel safe. We have a lot of work to do before we get there.
Thank you. Councilmember Raman.
Well, yeah, thank you for that question. And I will say I share your fear of bicycling. I used to be a bicycle commuter many years ago. And I'm a little scared of biking now. So that's why I've really been focused in my time in office on implementing the recommendations from the mobility plan through our normal resurfacing schedule for our streets as often as we can. We've also put up Council District 4's first protected bike lanes. We implemented the first street closure to cars in Los Angeles in a decade in Griffith Park. And our office has a brilliant senior deputy for transportation who's really focused on expanding that work every day. Mehmet, he's just a fabulous resource and really highlights every single opportunity that we have to be able to expand that protected bike lane network as highlighted in the mobility plan. Our major priority is really establishing bike and active transportation connectivity between the basin and the valley. We have roads between them that are really perilous to ride a bike on, but neighborhoods should feel more like neighbors than they currently do. And so establishing a safe and comfortable connection between these is really important. We're doing that in two ways in our district. We've raised a lot of investment for the LA River bike path, both in addressing homelessness along that bike path, so it's safe for people to use, but also in actually building it out. We've raised millions from grants for making sure that that's a protected and safe connection from the valley to the basin. And we're also looking at making safety improvements to streets in the Cahuenga Pass. I think this is absolutely essential to be able to address our issues. And I did want to say that our office, not related to the mobility plan specifically, we're really funding active transportation infrastructure like bus shelters and sidewalk infrastructure in ways that the city has talked about but hasn't done before. And I'm very proud of that.
Thank you for your comments, Councilmember Raman and Mr. Weaver. I'm going to hand things over to Melanie.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Melanie Winter and my pronouns are she, they. I'm a native Angelino and a CD4 constituent and a resident of Studio City for 26 years, where I live with my ridiculously adorable service beast, Maisie. As the founder and director of a nonprofit organization, I've worked with the city on social and environmental justice issues for 30 years, serving on countless steering and advisory committees for water, open space, transit, and sustainability plans, and helping to develop policy. The city has a follow-through problem on climate goals. We've declared that we'll shift to 100% renewable electricity by 2035, end oil drilling throughout the city, cut car trips in half by 2035, reduce greenhouse gas emissions 25% by 2025, and we have a sustainability plan that is not a policy document. So we aren't on track to make any of the goals that we've established, some of which are enshrined in law and some of which are stuck in the process. My question is, how would you address the climate policy implementation gap between the council motions, the plans, and the reality on the ground? And while everything is pressing, what is most pressing for you right now? And we'll start with Councilmember Raman. You're on mute.
Sorry, I had a question from my son that was so pressing that
I figured.
I had to answer it. So apologies. Okay. Well, I really love this question. I think you're absolutely right that the city has a major implementation problem. And I would say that's not limited to climate issues. That's universal across many of the issues that we're trying to address. And it's a big focus of mine. Like, I want to do legislative work, but I also want to do bureaucratic functioning work. And that's its central goal of the work that I've brought to the city council over the past 2.5 years. So in talking about climate issues, I serve on the Air Quality Management District Board, and a big issue there right now that I don't hear as much citywide discussion about is managing emissions at the port. It's already one of the region's biggest polluters, and there's a lot of work being done right now at the board and with the community to figure out how to handle meaningful reductions on emissions from that polluter without job losses. There's a lot of unionized jobs that are at stake there, or major reductions in cargo traffic, which are a major driver of our region's economy. And I think it's one of our biggest challenges going forward. AQMD has struggled with actually reducing emissions, but our recent work on the warehouse ISR, the indirect source rule, has generated a great deal of compliance and has reduced emissions. So I'm hopeful that the tools that the AQMD has, whether it takes the form of an ISR or some other form, will actually help us get to enforcement and regulation that really works in ways that other departments or other tools that we have at our disposal are not able to generate. And I think for me, another big issue that we have to take on, which I don't have time to get into here, is decarbonizing our buildings. Transit is, of course, a major generator of pollution, but our building stock is our second biggest generator. We've already decarbonized new buildings. Now we have to take on existing buildings, and I'm working on that right now at City Council.
Thank you so much. Mr. Weaver.
Great. So I see city government as having two primary functions. One is public safety and the other is infrastructure. And we are very fortunate to live in a state where we have a state legislature that is taking climate change seriously and is changing a lot of the rules that affect our city. And I see the city of LA's job as being ready to meet those demands. So the top of mind thing for me is our electrical grid. We are moving quickly towards electrical vehicles, more electric. We're supposed to be all electrical vehicles in the state for sale by 2035. And we don't have a power grid that can handle that. I mean, our power grid already has rolling brownouts during heat waves because of the draw on air conditioners. And as we're moving more and more things to electric, we have to be ready for the additional drain that is on our system. And so this is where I think pushing DWP to invest in the infrastructure necessary to sustain the next generation of electrification. And this also matters too, if we're talking about adding hundreds of thousands of new housing units, that electricity has to come from somewhere. So I think if we're thinking long term, it's about how do we prepare ourselves for the next set of obstacles. I do agree with the councilwoman that the harbor is a huge carbon sink. It is a big problem that absolutely needs to be tackled. And then I also think it's very important for our city to be investing in green spaces, in tree canopy, and those kinds of things that reduce the strain on our air conditionings, reduce temperatures, and pull carbon out of the air. And it's something we've tried as a city before, but every time we try it, leadership kind of gets distracted and loses focus. Franklin Boulevard, just over here, has a bunch of trees that were planted by the city and have died. And I think we need leadership that really prioritizes maintaining that urban canopy.
Thanks so much to both of you. I'm going to pass things over to Caroline.
Thanks, Melanie. Good evening. My name is Carolina Goodman, she, her. I'm a constituent from Sherman Oaks. As a member of the League of Women Voters of Greater Los Angeles, I've enjoyed collaborating with LA Forward on a number of events. The League has a long history of advocating for independent redistricting at all levels of government. I've attended almost all of the last redistricting commission hearings, as well as the meetings of the City Council's ad hoc committee on governance reform. My question today is about city charter reform in Los Angeles. City Council's ad hoc committee for governance reform is currently evaluating possibilities for council expansion and independent redistricting. While much of the conversation has been about these two reforms, most, if not all, coalitions have acknowledged that neither of these reforms will be a silver bullet to centering the voices of everyday Angelenos. There are many other reforms that council members and coalitions have indicated they'd like to see in discussion, such as democracy vouchers, land use reforms, ranked choice voting, campaign finance reform, and more. If you could push for a third reform to accompany expansion of city council and independent redistricting as ways to ensure more fair representation and governance for Angelenos, what would that third reform be? How would you explain the current reality for Angelenos without this reform? And what would the desired impact be for everyday Angelenos after this reform was implemented? Mr. Weaver,
Great.
you're going first.
Great. I love this question. I have so many different ideas on charter reform, so many things that matter a lot to me. But one reform that is top of mind would be, I would love to see a reforming of our neighborhood council system. You know, we're in this moment where we're really grappling with the democratic process and representation and what that means. And we actually have this tremendous system, potentially tremendous system in the neighborhood councils for community activism and democracy to meet. The problem is, when the neighborhood councils were designed, they were kind of designed to fail. They were designed to placate the community as opposed to empower the community. And because of that, a lot of city council members find them to be more of a nuisance than a benefit. And because they don't have any meaningful power or meaningful say, no one wants to be a part of them. And participation's low. It tends to be only incentivized by kind of, you know, a lot of the people that you really want in these kinds of positions just don't show up. And I think as we're thinking about how to engage 4 million people in the city of Los Angeles, I would love to see neighborhood councils that are actually empowered to have real decision-making ability, to be the voice of their community, have funds to actually feel like they're making a difference, and really be able to focus city council on the neighborhood specific issues. Because right now, so many of our neighborhood councils can't make quorum and they're in crisis because people have just given up. I think with a city this large, we need a healthy and robust neighborhood council system to be the voice of the people at the community level, at the neighborhood level, to make meaningful change and have your voice heard in City Hall. So.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. And Councilman Raman?
Well, yeah, thank you for this question. Governance reform has been, I think, at the focus of so much of my work in City Council so far, so I'm really excited to be able to talk about it. I led on the motion to create an independent redistricting process. I brought the motion to create the ad hoc committee on governance reform, which is advancing this work of creating independent redistricting and expanding the City Council. And I think I want to talk about the third reform that is essential to have alongside these other two, which is removing a lot of council member discretion from our land use decision-making. Because our community plans and our general plans across the city are mostly many, many years out of date, almost every major project that gets approved needs a parcel level variance from what it's currently zoned for. These were plans that were made in the 80s in some cases, and were designed for a much smaller, very different city. What does this mean for individual council members? It means we have huge amounts of power in deciding what gets built and what doesn't. That has had terrible consequences for the city. Officials who are motivated by politics, they can deny housing, which is so needed. They deny affordable housing and homeless housing in the face of community pushback. And this happens over and over again. And it's led to our affordable housing and overall housing shortage here in Los Angeles. And in several cases, they've used that discretionary authority to personally profit, as we saw in the case of Jose Huizar and others on the city council. If we expand the council and don't reduce some of the control that people in my position have over land use, this dynamic could actually get worse. Electeds could actually get more responsive to a smaller group of voters, and I think the opportunities for corruption could remain. So for me, this is essential.
Thank you both. I'm going to turn it over to Erica, who will take us into closing statements.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, we're really excited to move into closing statements. I'd like to first thank the candidates for your thoughtful and substantive remarks tonight. We'd love to thank you for being on time. That's really valued as well. So now we're moving into the closing statements. Again, you will have the 3 minutes each. You can use that time to, wrap up, provide a conclusion. You can use that time to return to any of the topics we've talked about tonight if you wanted to share additional thoughts, or you can tell people how to get in touch with you, anything you'd like. So we'll turn it over to Councilmember Raman first, for those 3 minutes of any closing remarks you'd like to share.
Well, thank you so much for having me again. And thank you to all of you in the audience who attended today's discussion. It's been really an incredibly rich discussion, and I am so, so happy to be here. You know, I want to use this final couple of minutes to talk about trust, because to me, that is the thing that will lead us through a very challenging time in our current city. And I'm here and I'm running for the seat again. And I want to do this work because I believe in city government. I believe in the power of government to do good, to do the right thing, to be effective. But it has failed Los Angeles in so many ways. We've let our housing and homelessness crisis spiral out of control. We failed in terms of our ethics. It's really been a challenging moment to be in power here. But what I've tried to do in my time here is to try and restore that trust in as many ways as possible. One is really delivering on the change that I ran on, showing that government can do the work. It's not just that I believe in a person-centric approach to homelessness. I believe it works better at ending homelessness than any of the approaches, the punitive approaches that the city has used so far. And I want to show that my response works in my district. It's why me and my staff are out there working so hard every single day. I want to show that good government can address this crisis. And I want people to have faith that we can take on this big challenge and to trust us to get it done. I told people I would get back out to residents. When I ran for office and I knocked at people's doors, I told them, this is not the last time you'll be hearing from me. And in my time in office, we have kept that promise over and over again. I've invested in community outreach teams in my office as part of my team. We've delivered 10,000 composting pails across the district. We've delivered rent relief information to tenants at their doors. And every time we knock on a constituent's door, it's an opportunity not just to have a conversation with them about organics recycling or whether they're having issues with their rent, but also about the city and how they can lean on the city for the support that they need. And I think it's also why I've been so focused on governance reform. I know there's state bills that are talking about independent redistricting. We could wait for the state to do it. But I want to show the city that after a time when we have betrayed the people's trust, elected representatives in those tapes, elected representatives who took bribes, I want to show that there are elected representatives who will vote to take away their own power for the good of Los Angeles. And I'm really hopeful that I can continue to build that trust for this city in this role. Thank you again so much for coming and for sharing this space with me.
Thank you, Councilmember. Now we'll turn it over to Ethan Weaver.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you all for welcoming me here and letting us both share our thoughts about the future of Los Angeles. I moved to Los Angeles when I was 18. I grew up in a small town outside Portland, Oregon, in a fundamentalist evangelical family. And I fled here as a little gay kid trying to just get away and find a home. And when I came to LA, I found that home. And in 2007, this was a radically different city. This was a city that was on the upswing, that people took pride in, that people felt was on the right direction. And over the years, I've seen that Los Angeles slowly disappear. The Valley used to be a place where a blue-collar family could buy a home. And now someone like me, someone like many of the people on this call are priced out of the housing market forever. And at the same time, I've just seen a decay of our city services, of public safety, of public trust. And as someone who's worked in the community for many years, I sense in the voters a frustration and a fear and a desire for a different course. And so the reason I'm running is to provide an alternative, to provide a vision for a different path forward, a path that prioritizes safety, building, and creating a vibrant community, both for our residents and for our business community. We're in an ecosystem here. It's not us versus them versus them. If one part of our city falters, we all falter, and we can see it faltering left and right. So I'm running to provide a different course. I'm running with a different vision. And I hope that you'll follow me along this path. If you would like to find out more, go to my website, ethanweaver.com. Or you can follow me on Instagram or TikTok at Ethan Weaver LA. But I believe in Los Angeles. I believe this is the greatest city on earth, and I believe it is a city worth fighting for. And that's why I have changed my path from my lifelong dream of being a prosecutor to doing this, what is easily the hardest thing I've ever done. But Los Angeles is worth fighting for, and I hope I can count on your support fighting forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ethan. Thank you, Councilmember Raman and Ethan, for sharing your closing statements. And now I'll turn it over to Godfrey to close us out.
Thank you so much, Erica. Thank you again to the candidates who were able to join us this evening and share a little bit more about their campaigns. But most of all, thank you to the almost 50 of you who have been in and out of this particular conversation, and the many more who will watch us on YouTube. We will probably upload this on the LA Forward Institute website tomorrow. And so you can feel free to share it with other CD4 residents and constituents who are looking to see two of their options. Again, just want to acknowledge that there is a third candidate out there, but thank you to the two who are able to join us today. Many more conversations to come. Again, the election is February, March is the initial primary. And this is not the only particular race that we are trying to get educated on. Tomorrow, we're having a Council District 14 candidate forum with 9 candidates who are here from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Tonight, we had the opportunity to hear substantially from 2 candidates. You can imagine that with 9 folks, we've had to be very thoughtful and extend the time as well. You may have heard news today that a new candidate has entered the race for CD14 Council District. We, again, similar to this call, we've organized with 9 candidates who had filed quite some time ago. And so those are the 9 candidates that we're going to be featuring tomorrow in that conversation with a lot of the same topics that you heard about tonight. So feel free to join us. We expanded the Zoom. There was a lot of demand for Council District 14 in particular, because it's been in the news a lot. So, feel free to pass that particular link along. And for the candidates who are on here, potentially take a look at who your possible colleagues could be if you'd like to return. But otherwise, thank you all so much for joining LA Forward Institute's candidate forum for Council District 4. You'll be able to find this at laforward.institute/forums beginning tomorrow. Thank you all so much, and have a great September 21st day of September.